Hey everyone, and welcome to another video. This is going to be all of the stuff that I got for the first half of August, and I'm just going to warn you straight away that it's a lot. It's a lot. So this video is probably going to be incredibly too long, but I hope you'll bear with me regardless. There's a lot of stuff here, mainly because I did actually get a large part of my proxy order in from the US. So if what I tend to do is if I buy something from the US that doesn't ship internationally, I have it sent to the proxy address and then combine it all together and ship it to me. So I sent one of the part of that to me just recently, so that's why there's a huge amount of stuff in here. But as well as that, I did have my general pre-order new releases and also the last half of a series that I bought the first half to ages and ages ago, but there's plenty to look and talk about, so yeah, I'm just gonna get straight into it. So first off are some anime DVDs, and this is to a series that I've heard some great things about. I got a glowing recommendation for, so I decided to pick it up because it is a old Bandai show that, unlike some of their more popular titles, never got rescued or relicensed. And that is almost all of the singles for Fantastic Children. So we have Volume 1, Volume 2, Volume 4, 5, and Volume 6, the last one. From what I understand of this show, it's somewhat of a drama sci-fi series with like weird kids with powers. I'm actually really looking forward to this. As I said, I've heard really great things about it, and I did have quite a good friend recommend it to me. So I'm hoping to get to this one sooner rather than later. And next for the anime DVDs, I did just pick up the DVD release of Ristorante Parody. So this is sort of the budget release that Nozomi Entertainment put out a couple years ago now. I just never got around to picking it up, and I think it was on sale at Right Stuff for very, very, very cheap a while ago, like over a year ago. That's how long some of this proxy stuff has been hanging out over there. So yes, finally glad to have this in the collection. This is the last of the Natsume Ono anime adaptations that I needed to finish my collection. Then we head into some Blu-rays, the first being a UK release, the anime limited release of Lu Over the Wall, the collector's edition, of course. I hadn't seen this film before, but it's a Yuasa film, and I think most people know that I'm a big fan of his work. I had heard really great stuff about this movie. Unfortunately, it didn't screen here over in Australia, so I didn't have the opportunity to see it in cinemas, but it did screen in the UK at Scotland Loves Anime, and there was nothing but glowing reviews from that, so I was fairly confident in picking this film up. I have watched it since, and it is absolutely marvelous. It's really, really, really great. I highly recommend it to pretty much anyone, especially Yuasa fans, but it's just really light-hearted. It sort of has I don't really know quite how to describe it. It has a somewhat similar premise to Ponyo in that it has mermaids and sort of mermaids interacting with humans, but aside from that, like, there really is no similarities. It actually reminds me more so of like Barakamon, if you've seen that show or read that manga. It's really good. Absolutely adorable, and like with most anime limited releases, it is a digipack with a book. The book has a bunch of character designs and various pieces of artwork, and a interview in there, so really great value. And I'm so glad to have finally gotten this film. It is a newer release in the UK, and one to definitely keep an eye out for. I don't know if it's been licensed in the US though yet, which is a shame. It does have a dub though, and the dub is really good. I watched it with the dub, and it was very fun. Yeah, as I said, I liked it a lot, and yeah, just really good film to you know, pick up or watch if you have the opportunity to do so. Next, for my UK Blu-ray releases, I have the limited edition of My Love Story. So as you can see, it's just like the Blu-ray size packaging. It has a slip cover and then a hard chipboard box to hold the thing. I think it's really cute, and it is just a normal case. Inside it does have some Valentine's Day cards and a poster as like the physical extras. Again, things that I'm not super enthused about. I don't really care about physical extras, but they're at least they fit into this case without demanding more width to it. This is an MVM release, or actually no, it's an Animatsu release. MVM have done somewhat similar releases as well though, I believe. And Animatsu is sort of a newish company in the UK. I haven't really bought any of their releases just because they're not things I'm super interested in, or I've already bought the US release for. So this is actually my first release of theirs. I think so. Yeah, it's the first release of theirs that I've bought. And again, this is one that I think most people enjoyed this anime. It's one that I think a lot of people can enjoy, even if you're not always or necessarily a fan of like high school romance stuff. It's really likable. It's quite funny. All of the characters are really endearing. It is an older show at this point, although it feels terrible to say that about a show from like 3 or 4 years ago, maybe. Yeah, yeah, I'm just really happy to finally have this series in my collection after so long sort of pushing it off and leaving it. Then we have some US limited edition releases. The first one being the Funimation set of Mob Psycho 100. Again, because this was with my proxy, this I actually bought before the series went out of print. It was sort of just on the cusp of this limited edition being harder to find. This series I adore. I'm really looking forward to the second season coming out next year, I believe. Yeah, really eager for that one. But this box, this limited edition, I think is probably the perfect example of like a unnecessary limited edition. This is just before Funimation started going to their single case width chipboard box sets that they now do with series like Yuri on Ice, 91 Days, Orange, etc. Similar to the UK sets I just showed and that Viz have been doing for a while now. But this box is, I think, just because it was standard for it to be a 2-disc, like 2-case wide set, they kept it that way, but they left the space in there for the extras. This is only a 12 or 13 episode show. I think 12 episodes. And then we have an extras box in there, which is not, like, I don't think it's necessary. None of the extras are that, like, exciting that you need this extra space, especially considering one of the extras with this set is a spoon. So people who are familiar with the show probably understand why it's a spoon, but I really wish that US companies stopped giving like these weird frivolous extras, physical extras. I feel like if you want merchandise for a show, because fans do say that they like having keychains or buttons or whatever else for a series they really love, that's fine, but I think you can purchase that outside of the actual show you're buying. And for things like, I don't know if people were actually wanting a spoon, or with, I remember with the Beyond the Boundary set that Sentai put out, they had like a lanyard and the fake glasses. I don't know how many people are wanting those types of extras. I can understand stickers or like a poster, or, you know, little papery bits and bobs, that's fine. Or other extras like CD, soundtracks. But it's just, yeah, regardless, I do think that Funimation did a fairly good job with like the actual, I don't know if you can see it, like there's a interesting holographic shatter effect on this box, and the show itself is wonderful. I'm glad to actually have the show. But I am hoping that we see less of the bonus spoons and maybe more bonus information booklets, things like that. The next US set is actually one that I've been highly anticipating, and I had shipped to my proxy address mainly because international shipping wasn't available and I did want to support it, and that is the Skip Beat Kickstarter. So I actually participated in the Kickstarter as it was ongoing. So I have the limited edition, which has the chipboard box set, the like slip box set, and the DVD and Blu-rays in here. I think there's also a poster in here and like a participation certificate and some other things that were Kickstarter exclusives. I have mentioned this before, I think mostly in regards to the manga, and a lot when the actual Kickstarter was going on, but I really love this series. I think it's one that maybe some people are off-put by the art style or the premise, but if you give it the chance, it's really, really fun and engaging and likable. Before the Kickstarter, I really didn't have any experience with Skip Beat, and then when the Kickstarter was announced and ongoing, I took the opportunity to watch the show on Crunchyroll, because I think it still is on Crunchyroll, and absolutely fell in love with it. Immediately bought like a majority of the volumes that were out, something like 36 volumes at the time, and have just consumed it. It's wonderful. Even now when it's hitting like into the 40 volume length, it's still so wonderful. But yeah, I'm really glad that this Kickstarter in particular was so successful, because they did have issues with it initially with Indiegogo. I don't think a lot of people were super like enthusiastic in using Indiegogo, because people don't trust it. And I think also Anne of Pied Piper had a very successful Kickstarter campaign previously, which I also participated in for Time of Eve. So she obviously had proof of concept that was incredibly successful. I don't know how successful monetarily down the line, and I think Skip Beat is in a similar boat where everything's been fulfilled to the utmost and all of the promises have been kept, but I don't know how much money is left over for the actual team behind it. But this series is definitely, or at least this release, this Kickstarter release, is definitely a product of love and dedication from the fan base, because not only did they exceed the Kickstarter goal, they hit their initial goal from the Indiegogo campaign, which had been lowered once they had moved to Kickstarter. A whole bunch of new extras and so much campaigning online and in person. I remember reading about. It was just big news, and I'm so glad that it was so successful, because this is a fantastic show, and I'm so glad to finally have the dubbed discs in my collection. I don't know if I'm going to be rewatching this show anytime soon, but I do know that a lot of care was put into the dub for this. And I mean, it's been so long that this series actually has a Australian and UK domestic release already, so I could have waited and just picked up those discs for cheaper later, but I wanted to put my money towards something that I love and support, and I'm glad that it seems to have all worked out. Finally, for Blu-rays, we have an Australian release for a show I am sure most people are aware of, and that is My Hero Academia Season 2 Part 2, the limited edition. So this is the Blu-ray release. It also has the DVDs in there, book, and extras. Again, physical extras, not my thing. I really dislike when companies do this. This is a Sony release. Here in Australia, at least. In the UK, Sony isn't even putting out these limited editions that mirror the US releases because they sold so poorly. The only reason, and I had made the decision for myself that I wasn't going to buy this release because I'm not gonna, I only want the discs, and the boxes are just too big. And if I ever did, it would be for cheap because I want the book, and I probably would just take these things out, put them in the box for the first half of the season, and, you know, everything would be happy. So obviously, something happened to influence my decision, and that is that I found this pretty much like new. There's a couple dings, I don't know, there's this one here, and there's like a little scuff on the bottom of here. But I found this copy on Cash Converter's website, and for people who haven't watched my videos before, that's sort of like a pawn shop chain here in Australia, for less than half of retail price, which is, and it was actually cheaper than what the standard release of the series or these part of these sets are going to be when they're released in a couple months. So I saved a huge amount of money. It comes with all of the extras. Obviously you can see the condition it's in pretty much, like, it's very good condition. It's not new, but I'm not too worried about, you know, little dings here and there, especially for the price that I got, especially considering I'm not really going to be keeping this box in particular hanging around on my shelf. I'll just probably pack it away in storage with all the other physical extras I got with the first half. Yeah, it's a show that I think needs no introduction. I know that a lot of people are watching this show, love this show. I haven't started the third season yet for this series. I have watched the first 2 seasons streaming though, and part of the first season I rewatched on Blu-ray. Yeah, it's great, and as most people know, I'm following the manga. Like, I really do love this series, but I think that this limited edition release format is, yet again, companies sort of capitalizing on this limited edition hype and not putting out a product that a majority of fans want. I know a lot of people are complaining about these oversized sets, especially for My Hero Academia, because it is such a hugely popular show. Obviously Funimation and Sony, who are directly mirroring their release, see it as an opportunity. There's a lot of fans, a lot of casual fans and viewers who are going to pick up these limited edition releases, so I'm sure it makes sense business-wise. But it takes up a lot of shelf space for collectors, and the fact that they cut, I mean, obviously this series, this season is like 24, 25 episodes long, so they gave limited editions to both halves, which is the most frustrating part, because if they'd given a large box to the first half of the season and then just expected people to buy the standard of the second half to fit into the same box, I wouldn't have as much of a problem. So like their I think an Assassination Classroom did that. Funimation used to do it a lot, but their recent releases not so much, and I think that's because of the popularity of Sentai's type of limited editions, which I, for the most part, really dislike, which I've talked about for way too much before anyway. So it's no secret that I do like well done, nicely made limited editions, especially for shows I really, really love. And in my case, here in Australia at least, My Hero Academia didn't get a standard release. The first season didn't get a standard release until, you know, this year. And it still actually hasn't come out. It's coming out in the next month or so. So if you didn't buy the limited edition initially, you would have had to wait at least 2 years to actually own the discs in any type of format. And if you're a dub watcher, that means you would have had to wait to actually watch the show, which is, like, that's not fair, I don't think. But as I said, the standard editions for this and these two half-season sets of the second season are coming out in Australia very, very soon. So if you are a standard-only collector, and you're in Australia, that's something to look out for if you're wanting this show. But yeah, this is a really fun show, and I'm sure most people know that, most people are watching it. And yeah, it's an okay release, but just all of this guff. I don't need any of it. There's magnets, there's like a weird pencil case thing, which smells terrible as well. Like, it will stink up whatever you're using it for. Just like that really chemically plastic gross smell. I'm sure there's like maybe a keychain in there. I don't remember. I know the first one had a keychain and like cards, trading cards. Yeah, yeah, I've said my piece. But My Hero Academia, the actual show, the actual series, really fun, especially if you like sort of action, high school comedy, shonen type series, and I'm sure most of you are watching it or reading it. Okay, enough with the anime, onto manga, which I think more people care about. And as I said, there's a lot here, so I'm just gonna get straight through it. First is Yona of the Dawn, Volume 13. Haven't had the opportunity to read this one, but Yona's always really good. I really enjoy it, and as I've mentioned previously, I really am happy that this type of, like, action shoujo is becoming more popular again in the West. In regards to this title, I think has made it a bit more noticeable. It's a bit of variation from what I think a lot of people regard as shoujo, as like the typical high school romance stuff. Yeah, as I said, haven't read this yet, but I'm sure it'll be fabulous, and I'll be really excited for the next volume once it's come out. We're all, like, at this release schedule, we are getting these volumes like once every 2 months, so it's not like we're not getting these volumes out at a very rapid pace, but we're still so far behind Japan, so there's plenty to read and plenty to look forward to with this series. And yeah, I'm hoping that this volume will just be more of the same. Another volume that I haven't read, mainly I say I haven't read these because I have just restarted uni, so I haven't had a huge amount of time, but I'm expecting to be really good, is volume 26 of Heike. This is a series we are getting every month, and I recently sat down and actually caught up with these volumes because for a long time I was very behind on this series. I really enjoy Heike. I think it's a great shonen sports series. I do think that the volume a month pacing has meant that the quality control for actual proofreading has slipped for this series. I don't know about this volume, and the last couple volumes haven't had this issue, but for the Shiratorizawa match, there was some pretty glaring errors in regards to scoring and how, like, they would put the points down, like, oh, this side won the points, but it would actually be flipped. So, like, say Karasuno it would say that Karasuno got a point, but it was obvious that it wasn't, just from the reactions of the characters and what was happening in the artwork. Like, you could tell. And I think that's a victim of this series being so quickly pushed out in order to catch up with these releases. I'm hoping that someone mentions it to Viz, because it seems like something that could be fixed in a follow-up edit for future reprints. But I'm not necessarily expecting it to be fixed. But regardless of that issue that I noticed pretty prominently, because it did happen over like 3 or 4 volumes. I don't know what was going on at Viz offices there. It might have been pretty stressful and pressured to put some books out. But aside from that, this series is actually really very good, and don't let that like scare you off from reading it. Yeah, I love this series. A lot of people love this series in anime and manga format. We're still, you know, probably half dozen volumes behind, but we are getting closer each and every month because of this monthly release schedule. And I mean, I'm happy, but also sad. And yeah, we'll see. But again, haven't read this volume, looking forward to it. I'm sure it'll be more of the same. Great characters, funny interactions, interesting story. And although Haikyuu has never been anything like super unique or influential in its like actual changes and challenging the genre, it doesn't need to be. I think it's the perfect execution of a really standard premise. And yeah. Next we have back to My Hero Academia, volume 14 of this series, and we are ahead of the anime currently with this volume. As I mentioned with my Blu-ray talk and explanation, I haven't watched any of season 3 of the series, although I am reading it and I am up to date. I did manage to read this one. So new characters introduced both on the heroes and villains side. Lots of new relationship dynamics coming up. Interesting stuff. I'm really looking forward to seeing how this series continues to evolve and grow and mature. Again, not a super unique premise. I think super powered or unique children or teens in high school and trying to figure out their powers and all this sort of stuff is fairly standard for fiction. I mean, we have a whole history in the West of Cape comics, but even things with like more recently, and even in anime and manga, you know, superhero stuff isn't all that rare. So this isn't like a super unique premise, but the execution is done really, really well. Yeah, it's one that I think, again, most people are reading or watching or enjoying. Like with Haikyuu, I don't need to actively encourage anyone to be getting into the series because most people are. Yeah, it's still great. This one is coming out every 2 months. And, you know, I like that pace. Sometimes I do have to go back and remind myself what happened in the last couple chapters before I go straight into it, but that's, I think, more so a product of me reading so many manga series at once and sometimes forgetting like what's going on with some other series. So yeah, My Hero Academia, still great, you know, looking forward to volume 15 coming out whenever it does, so next month or so. And yeah. Next we have some manga from my proxy package, and that is volumes 9 and 12 of Moonchild. These are the final volumes that I needed to complete the set. This is a 13-volume shoujo series that I am so excited to finally have completed. This originally was released by CMX, so it's been out of print for a very long time. Volume 9 in particular is very hard to get, but I found one in really, really good condition, I believe, on eBay, and so managed to buy both of these through sort of secondhand sellers, and I'm so happy. So I'm finally able to finish this series now. I had read the first probably half of it so far, and I didn't want to get too into it because I knew I wouldn't be able to finish it. And I did, but again, I bought these a while ago, but because I didn't ship out my proxy order until recently, it took forever for them to get to me. So yeah, really, really, like, I think this is, it's a older 90s shoujo, not really what a lot of people would necessarily regard as like modern day shoujo. I'm really looking forward to finally finishing this one, because honestly, in my opinion, I think CMX were a really interesting publisher. They put out a lot of really interesting titles. This plus they originally put out Emma, a Victorian Romance, or the Emma Kaorumori manga, as well as lots of others. They had a huge sort of catalog of really interesting lesser known titles. I used to own a series put out by them called Chikyu Misaki, which was or Misaki Chikyu, I think it's Chikyu Misaki, which was like a moe series before moe really became a thing, and it was about like a cute Loch Ness monster. Like, it was a really, again, really interesting little thing. But I'm really glad that Moonchild has finally finished in my collection and I can read it. Next on the list we have another out of print manga. It's actually a lot. I bought them all together from eBay, thanks to a wonderful friend I met via YouTube. She posted me the link after convincing me, and I was really interested in trying the series. But this is the Comics 1 release of Bride of Damos. So we have Volume 1, Volume 2, Volume 3, Volume 4, Volume 5, Volume 6, and Volume 7. So, this series, if you've, as I said, it's a shoujo horror, and only these first 7 volumes were ever released. It is a 17-volume long series, and if you've watched my videos, I think most of you noticed or maybe have seen that I tend to not, or I try to avoid series that were never completed in English. I don't like having unfinished series in my collection. There are some notable exceptions, of course, one being Shirley, which was another CMX release actually, and Wandering Sun, although no, I mean, there's really not a huge amount of hope for that one, but never say never, as I try to stay by that rule. But as a general rule, I tend to not go after out of print and incomplete manga series. But the reason I did for this series is not only because I'm really enthusiastic about finding more shoujo horror for the collection. It's a genre that I think is greatly underrepresented right now, and one that I really enjoy generally. But also, this series is quite episodic. Each chapter or each volume has pretty self-contained stories, so you don't feel like you're necessarily missing out on a huge amount of, like, you're not losing the whole overarching plot or the conclusion of the story necessarily. For those who are not familiar with this series, it follows this demon. So the sort of prologue or the lead up is that brother and sister fall in love. The gods sort of decry that, curse them. He becomes a demon, and the sister, her body is sort of cast into the ocean. As she dies, she tells her brother to find another girl who looks exactly like her, so she can possess that other girl's body, and then they can be together again. And then things don't really work out, and terrible things happen, and things get pretty creepy and scary and horrific. So yeah, it's not really it's definitely a horror series. But I'm really looking forward to it, actually reading the entirety of it. And yeah, I'm so glad that I managed to find a set of the series for a very good price, thanks to my friend. And I look forward to... Next we have a weird one. This one I didn't buy through my proxy, but I did buy it secondhand. And this is Eriko Tadano's Works, which is a Yuri series. You can see it's very thin. But turning it around, you can maybe see here that it was put out by ALC Publishing or Annie Lesbocon Publishing. And so this was actually put out in 2003, 2004 by Annie Lesbocon, which later became YuriCon, a convention, and sort of the convention group, the staffers there. And it is a legitimate manga release. It is, you know, a licensed work from a Japanese artist. But yeah, it's a really weird one. Like, this is the sort of thing that you don't find all that often. And I don't know, they had an online store. I'm sure they sold it as like at the convention. But it's just a short collection of sort of one-shot Yuri one-shots. It's quite explicit. It's not like it's obviously written by like a lesbian woman, so it's definitely catered towards like actual like romance between women without getting stuck in like a lot of the tropes of what I think modern day and sort of more typical Yuri is. This is, I think, technically a doujin work. Like, I don't think Tadano has a huge like actual published resume in Japan, at least not as far as all of my research has gone over, but it's an interesting little collection. It's not necessarily one I would recommend sort of seeking out if you're, one, not a Yuri fan, and two, not like super into wanting to read this, but if you come across it, it is an interesting one for the collection. It's one that yeah, it's fun, it's interesting, it's a little bit weird. It's certainly like almost like a time capsule because it really shows like what a different place the anime market and the fandom was at during the early 2000s. It's sort of surreal. And I mean, now, even nowadays, YuriCon doesn't even exist. It did have a fairly good run of 5 or so years. But yeah, it's not a book that you're going to be able to find anywhere, like a legitimate bookstore. There's not even a title on the spine. Like, it was just a very specialized book for a niche market, and I think it achieves what it set out to do. Next is the most recent volume of Descending Stories, Volume 8, put out by Kodansha. I have sung the series praises pretty much ever since it was first licensed and announced. I, like a lot of other people, I believe, were introduced to the series via the anime adaptation, which is fantastic. Watch it on Crunchyroll if you haven't. Great drama. But this is a josei drama series about the art of rakugo, one that I absolutely adore. I really hope that more of Haruko Kumota's works get licensed into English, especially now that a lot more publishers are diversifying into BL. She has some pretty interesting books that she's put out as a BL author. But Descending Stories is one that I really, really love. I don't think it's necessarily for everyone, but if you're wanting a really interesting josei with a lot of depth, a lot of character growth and introspection, as I've said again in regards to the series, I think the main character is probably the most fleshed out and human and just intriguing and interesting and complicated fictional character I've ever read. It's his whole story and who he is, how he views his life and his work are just phenomenal. It's a testament to Kumoto's writing that this story is just endlessly wonderful to read and to watch. Yeah, there's only 2 more volumes left, so this does finish at volume 10, which I pre-ordered. That's coming out in November, December, and I'm gonna be so sad when it's over, but I'm gonna be so happy that I have it all. And again, people, I've said this before, but people give Kodansha a lot of flack in regards to, in my opinion, really superficial things, in regards to paper quality or like how they translate things. I don't even really know the full reasoning why people dislike Kodansha as a publisher so much, but in my opinion, I think they're one of the better publishers that we have. Because they are backed by their sort of parent publishing house in Japan, we do see so much variety from their catalog. It's phenomenal, and we are getting such niche and interesting and creative and wonderful stories like this series and like a lot of their other really recent licenses. Some of my favorite stuff is coming out from Kodansha. Even right now, things like Tokyo Tarareba Girls, this story, of course, Wotakoi is another one, again, To Your Eternity. I mean, those are all really different genres, but all really, great, in my opinion, series that don't necessarily appeal to everyone, but Kodansha has, licensed and put out these more niche titles, and I, as someone who enjoys a lot of lesser known and niche titles, I just applaud them. I think they and Seven Seas and One Piece books and sort of the Fantagraphics and Last Gasp, they put out some really interesting stuff. And of course I still do love a lot of Viz and Yen Press stuff, Vertical as well. They do a lot of different interesting eclectic stuff, but I'll always enjoy series from sort of the larger publishing companies, Yen and Viz, of course. But overall, for some of my favorite stuff being licensed and released, I do have to go with some of these smaller companies with much more diversity and variety. And I don't necessarily think Kodansha is that much smaller than like a Yen Press, but I do think they see value in things that aren't just the most recent trend of, popular genre, things like isekais or harems or, shonens or your normal romance high school story. We're getting more, and we're getting more from the market in general, but it's just, it's something I'm really happy about, and this series in particular I think epitomizes the whole change in market. Next we have another out-of-print book from my proxy box that I finally got, and that is Town of Evening Calm, Country of Cherry Blossoms by Fumio Kono. So from the art style, maybe people can tell, but this is the same mangaka who wrote In This Corner of the World. And this book, as you can see, is very skinny, but it was actually, I don't know if you can tell from that and if it will focus, but this was put out by Last Gasp, who are again, sort of a niche publishing house, which put out a lot of, or imprint I should say, that put out a lot of independent comics. They focus on comics of all sorts, not just manga, of course. And this, like with Kono's other work that we did get from Seven Seas, is about sort of everyday lives of people living in Hiroshima during the period of the Second World War, so sort of before and during and directly after the Hiroshima bombing. Yeah, I think her whole art style, the atmosphere, her writing is very gentle and soothing and atmospheric, but never plays down sort of the incredible tragedy and loss of, you know, the Hiroshima bombing. Obviously one of Japan's most major events, especially in modern history. It's obviously something that is still very, very apparent and relevant and aware within the minds of this of Japanese people in general. I mean, it happened in the past century, and I think everyone in most countries, especially ones who were involved, have been impacted in this way. And it's obviously Japan had such a huge impact at the end of the war, obviously ending the Second World War in its entirety, and seeing these sort of personal accounts and very human explorations of such a horrifying event, I think really grounds these types of stories to reality and makes you realize that, yes, this happened to real people. And of course, you know, as they say, all's fair in love and war, but, you know, should we allow these sorts of tragedies to continue happening, and the direct impact that it had on so many people who didn't really have any involvement with the war effort, as it were. They didn't, you know, they weren't military, they weren't in a area that, they were in an area with a lot of Air Force and Navy production and support, which is why Hiroshima was targeted. But I mean, you affect this one area, but you affect everyone in that area, even, you know, the women, children, elderly, etc., who really had no impact, and, you know, all of the innocent, everyone else who didn't have, I mean, they were just as much victims of the Japanese war effort as anyone else. So yeah, it's not a big book, it's fairly hard to find, but it is one that I wanted to get because I do really enjoy Kono's work. I think this is I mean, it's only 3 chapters long, it's a collection of 2 different stories, so it's not like In This Corner of the World where it's a longer overarching story, but even that book is more of vignettes of everyday life. This is like that. It's a vignette of sort of the mundane everyday, which then is affected by the bomb dropping. So yeah, really happy to have this, and I hope we see more of Kono's work, although they are sort of, from what I can tell, a lot of them are within this genre and handling this topic. So yeah, if you are wanting, and if you haven't read it yet, In This Corner of the World is very, very good. The film is even better. So yeah. And speaking of Hiroshima, and speaking of Last Gasp, we have, or I have, the second half of Keiji Nakazawa's Barefoot Gen. So we have volume 5, volume 6, volume 7, volume, ooh, I'm gonna move these, 8, volume 9, and volume 10, which is the last one. So for long-time subscribers, you know that I bought the first 4 of these hardcovers way back, maybe 2 years ago now. And the first 4 were initially put out by Last Gasp as like a Kickstarter release. I didn't buy them via the Kickstarter release, but that was how they got funded. And they were put out in these hardcovers as an effort to put this series into school libraries. I don't know how many people are aware of this, but Barefoot Gen, I believe, was the very first manga to ever get licensed and translated into English, full stop. And that was in an effort to create this sort of war memorial, nuclear awareness within the world, and obviously within the United States, and give an alternate perspective to the Hiroshima bombings for Americans and for people outside of Japan. So if you're unaware, Barefoot Gen is a autobiographical manga about Nakazawa's childhood in Hiroshima, surviving the Hiroshima bombings, and goes into incredibly painful and vivid and heartbreaking detail of the realities of that period. Not just, you know, the hundreds of thousands of people who died, obviously, as a direct impact of the bomb dropping, but all of those affected by radiation sickness, and even those who survived, who then were treated as outcasts by the rest of Japan because of coming from this area and possibly suffering from radiation illness or sickness. It's such a tragedy, and it's such a mark on sort of the modern warfare. I mean, I think the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki are something that, regardless of if you have ever done like world history, I mean, they're incredibly important and probably some of the most recognizable events within our modern warfare history. And again, this is a very personal story. It looks at this horrific event from a child's perspective and from, you know, an actual individual affected. It's not glazed over with any sort of fantasy or like overly dramatic stylings. It's just the pure recounting of this terrible thing that affected so many people. As I said, I bought the first 4 of these books many moons ago, and for a long time believed that that was all that we'd be getting from Last Gasp, at least in hardback. They did make they alluded to promises that they would continue or to reprint or to publish volume 5 to 10, but with these updated covers and all of that, because these are new covers and they're very like they've updated them, although you may notice that they are flipped. Like, these are still flipped volumes and all of the artwork. It also, like, they didn't update the Comic Sans. Like, it's very it's dated, and it's obviously a product of its time. This series originally came out in English in the 70s, so obviously not up to, I think, what people would regard as the manga standard now. And Last Gasp has sort of preserved the original publishing style of the series. But yes, Last Gasp made no promises in publishing 5 to 10 in hardcovers, but they did say they would probably do them in softcover editions, so you would still be able to own the series, but not in, you know, the fancy hardcovers that the first part got. But just recently, I believe it was at Anime Expo, I don't know if it was, I don't think it was announced at the event itself, but it happened around the same time when a lot of announcements were coming out. It wasn't really an announcement, it just sort of became knowledge, and some people did tag me on Twitter about it, which I was very happy that they were so considerate. But the Last Gasp put these on their online web store. They actually did a bundle for the last 6 volumes at a reduced price for people who already owned the first 4, and they also put soft cover editions for all 10 of the volumes onto their website. I bought these through Amazon mainly because if I bought them through their website, the shipping cost would have been, like, it would have negated any savings that I would have made, and the price was pretty much identical on Amazon, and at least with, like, Amazon Prime I got free shipping. So it's been a long time coming, but I finally have the last half of this monumentally influential manga series, one that I think is an incredibly important part of history, especially for people who collect manga or people who are just into history and don't mind reading personal accounts in comic format. And of course, I think that they're wonderful in achieving their perspective target of educating, you know, middle school and high school kids. If they can get these editions into school libraries, I think that's a great thing. I mean, it can only do good. But yeah, that it's heavy subject and important manga, and I'm going to just keep going, and hopefully with some more lighthearted subjects. Next is another new Viz release, and one that I'm super excited for. This is the debut volume of That Blue Sky Feeling, written by Okura, but art by Komahashi. This is Viz's first title that they announced as sort of their expansion into more Shonen and BL titles. I think if you're a fan of yaoi and BL, I think most people are aware that Viz does have an imprint dedicated to what I think most people would regard as yaoi, Sublime. They've put out dozens and dozens of titles, some of which I currently already collect, and some that are like very well known. And yeah, if you've read BL in the past, I'm sure you've come across a Sublime title. This one is actually just under the Viz imprint though, and I think that's mainly to do with this being more what we would classify here in the West, at least, as like a Shonen or BL title, because it's not like a hardcore, explicit, full of sex series that has a somewhat hackneyed plot just to string together intimate scenes, like a lot of more what we call yaoi is. This is a slice of life coming of age story between a couple of high school kids, 11th graders. One kid transfers into his school. He's transferred a lot throughout his school career, thanks to his family, and sort of has gotten used to making friends and sort of having to fit in again. And at his new school, he notices that there's this one kid who everyone sort of ignores, doesn't really interact with anyone, and so he takes it upon himself to include him, and he makes the effort to try and get to know this other kid, and he finds out sort of through other classmates and that people avoid him because he's gay, or at least the rumors are that he's gay. And so a lot of people are sort of off-put by this and don't really know how to act around him. And he's quite standoffish, like he doesn't really mind that people avoid him or don't really include him. And so really his only friend he has is a girl from another class, and they've grown up together. They've been friends since elementary school. And so she's really the only one who ever spends any time with him when she comes to his class and they have lunch together. So he finds it this new kid finds it really weird that there is this rumor, and doesn't really see the problem. And then slowly, he wants to be this other kid's friend. And then over the course of the book, you slowly realize that, and he's not, this transfer student isn't totally innocent. He does react somewhat because he wants to be this kid's friend, and then again he gets a bit caught up on this idea that people avoid him because he's gay, and then so he starts overthinking the fact that this kid might be gay, and then the kid says, "I am gay," and then he gets caught up on the fact that it's true, and he finds it a bit weird and off-putting, but he still doesn't want to ignore him or exclude him, and he doesn't really know why he's bothered by it. But he there are parts of this where he is bothered by the fact that he's gay, not because he's gay necessarily, but he doesn't fit in to the expected roles of what society deems people should be. And then slowly over the book, he starts he gets better at accepting gay people, or his friend at least, as just normal people. Just because you're gay, it doesn't mean you're any different, and you don't have to act like the super effeminate gay, and that sort of thing. And then slowly starts to wonder why he gets upset when this kid is more friendly with other kids. It's a slow coming of age and coming of realization of yourself. And over this first book, there's some really promising stuff. It's really interesting and sweet and wonderful. I really like the friendship between all the kids, and it does actually tackle this confusing period in adolescence where you are trying to find yourself and you don't have all the answers, and you might be prejudiced towards things that you don't even realize, and you have to actively question yourself and wonder why and learn things about the world. It's really, really, really good, and I'm so, I'd heard that from, as soon as it was announced, people were excited over this series. It was one that I was really excited for from Viz, and I think if Viz are expanding their library to titles like this is a great one to start with. Again, speaking of the market change, and compared to 2003, 2004, the early 2000s up until 2010 or 2006 to 2010, when like a lot of the market crashed and a lot of businesses full stop went bankrupt, and in extension, of course, like a lot of anime licensors, a lot of manga publishers, declared bankruptcy, stopped publishing things, just had to wrap up just because they couldn't survive the change in economy. Nobody had money, so people weren't spending. And obviously, beforehand, there had been this huge bubble, and licensing had been going through the roof, and all these different things that contributed to the market crash. Not just the anime crash, but the market crash in general. Now that we've recovered and have evolved and have changed how we're doing things, and now we're back to a point where there is so much wealth and variety and just everything you could ever want available, from anime, from manga, from TV to whatever. We're really seeing a shift and somewhat of a return to how things used to be. I've mentioned this before, but I was sort of a latecomer to anime and manga, and so I started at about 2008, 2009, so just before things like really took a huge downturn. And the stories of the early and mid 2000s of, anime conventions and yaoi manga being on, shelves at Barnes and Noble, and, it just being this huge thing. And there was, the other bookstore that used to have walls and walls of manga. It's just, it's a huge shift where brick and mortar stores aren't necessarily the lifeblood of this industry anymore, thanks to the digitization of media, but also the digitization of shopping and how people purchase things. So obviously we've recovered, and whilst I wouldn't say this is a yaoi series as most would think of it, it's definitely a BL series, but it is one that isn't focused on jumping straight into a romantic relationship, having super explicit scenes, anything like that. But we are seeing this slow shift of the market into more and more interesting and niche titles. We've seen it with 7 Season Yuri. We've seen it with One Piece books and all of their titles being put out. We're seeing it by the return of Tokyo Pop. Who would have ever thought that would happen? We're seeing it by Kodansha bringing over so much interesting, weird stuff. And we're seeing it from Viz putting out BL coming of age stories under their Viz imprint, not under the Sublime title. It's fascinating to watch, and it's it's a really healthy and interesting thing to see for this market, and I hope it continues to do well. As I said, if they are committing to this, and this is the first of many series, this is a great one to debut with because it's wonderful. I think you don't even have to be a BL fan or a Fujoshi or whatever you want to call them to enjoy this book. I think it falls more under the LGBT category. Things like Claudine and Shinonami Tasagare and My Soul Exchange Diary, My Lesbian Experience with Loneliness, etc., than it does a World's Greatest First Love or anything like that. But yeah, it's good, and I'm happy, and it's just a great book, and I'm looking forward to the next one, which is out in several months, so I'm a bit heartbroken at that. Also, it's a really thick book. I didn't mention that, but it's thicker than a general volume. So yeah, pick it up if you're wanting to try something a little bit different, or if you're a fan of any of those genres that I just mentioned previously, this is one you'll definitely like. But speaking of BL or yaoi manga, I do have some actual, what people would regard as yaoi. I don't like using that term, but it is very commonly used in the West, even now. But this is the more recent Junko release of Return of the Prince, put out by June. I bought this via my proxy mainly because June's international shipping is disgustingly too high, and this was a shop exclusive for a long time. And I'm a huge fan of Junko. I don't love all of the stories in this collection, but I just really like her books. This is, so after talking about like the greatness of publishers expanding and presumably thriving with like so many different genres and demographics now, June and digital manga publishing are sort of on the complete opposite spectrum. They can't seem to get it right, and everything they're doing is just causing more problems. Exacerbated, of course, by the constant Tezuka Kickstarters, and now they're really struggling to catch up, and from what I hear, the work environment is terrible. They're constantly cycling through interns. I don't even know how many Tezuka Kickstarters they've done, but obviously I think a lot of people are very aware of the Kimagure Orange Road Kickstarter, which is still, like, it's a year overdue. It still hasn't been fulfilled. And whilst I don't question that it will eventually get fulfilled, they can't handle their money. In a financial or like an accounting perspective, they raise money, from what I can tell, they raise money for, you know, licensing something or republishing something or whatever else, via Kickstarter, and then that money goes towards other debts. And that's like a pretty major thing you learn in accounting theory, is like something not to do in regards to the business and lenders relationship. But I feel like that's what DMP has had to do over the last several years now. They had like one or two really successful Kickstarters at the beginning with Tezuka, and then they just overflooded the Kickstarter with Tezuka Kickstarters, and then they had a really successful BL, or the Kickstarter for their BL or yaoi imprint, June, which is what this book is from. But now they're struggling to catch up. Their second one, their Sakura Kickstarter, again, hasn't fulfilled its pledges or its promises or whatever else, and it won't for at least 18 months. DMP have said that they're going to be fulfilling Kickstarter rewards in order. So next is Kimagure Orange Road, and then it's either Sakura or that other one that I can't remember, that's super controversial, for their Pecho or Pechi imprint, which was meant to be Kodomo no Jikan. That's what it is, Child's Play. Because they also had a very successful Kickstarter with that as well. But again, that's far, far, far from being fulfilled. As someone who pledged to both of their BL Kickstarters, not for the actual titles. Well, actually, not Sakura. I don't know. I pledged to both of them for titles that were out of print. They were earning money to reprint them. So I wanted to get out of print titles no, Sakura is the one they've fulfilled. It's the other one they haven't. I don't remember what artist it is, but it's someone. No, Psychedelico. I remember. Yeah, I did back Psychedelico for actual Psychedelico works because none of their reprints were anything I'm super interested in. But again, I'm not expecting to get those books anytime within the next 2.5 years. I am sure they will fulfill something, but again, it's a race to see whether the books come out or whether the company announces bankruptcy. But yeah, I think they vastly underestimated international shipping costs and then printing costs, and I don't know how they mismanaged their money so badly. And as a company, I don't trust them with anything. Like, if they did another Kickstarter, I wouldn't support it, probably because it would be a Tezuka title, and I'm not that interested in like any of the weird like one-shot stuff that he did, because he has so much manga and not all of it needs to be in English. There's some things that can just be whatever. But this wasn't a Kickstarter release. This was just one of their store release licenses. And I'm a big fan of Junko. I don't like supporting June, but unfortunately they do have some series that I really do like. And I hope that someday they may get their eggs all in a row and sort things out and start putting books out. And I don't like the fact that their international shipping is so atrocious, but unfortunately being an Australian, you get used to it. But yeah, this is it's a cute book. If you're a Junko fan, it's probably one to look out for, but it's probably hard to find. It might even be out of print by now. I don't know. June's a mess. Next we have another June title. This, again, I bought from their online store and had shipped to the proxy because their international shipping is atrocious. And I bought this one because they're having a major sale, I think, again, just to try and cover costs or something. Like, they were having a flash sale, so a lot of stuff was very, very cheap. And this was one that I picked up because I didn't have, and that is volume 1 of Border by Kazuma Kodaka, a mangaka whose work I actually really like. Her older stuff has a lot of pretty typical problematic stuff, but even her older stuff like addresses it after a while. Like, it starts off really dodgy and like dubiously, but then gets like a little better after a while. And I just really like her art style. I think she always does, or generally writes stories about like adults, and it's interesting. I don't know. I can't necessarily recommend her work to just anyone. I would think that most BL or yaoi fans already know her stuff. Like, she's been around forever. And her Kizuna manga, which was the first of her stories I've read, is like, it's well known. It has OVAs out on DVD in English. Like, her stuff is not exactly unknown, but I like her stuff. I mean, it's more typical like yaoi, but it's good. Border in particular, I mean, it does have some explicit stuff, but I think overall, like, the actual plot and story is pretty interesting. It's like a detective or private eye group, or like a group that helps you with your problems, and they go out and help people, and it's sort of incidental that the main character, the one on this cover, is gay, or like some characters are gay. Like, it's just like, there's obviously gay relationships in here, but it's not just focused on like, oh, will they get together? Won't they? And in regards to this character in particular, it's more like complicated. There's some pretty involved backstory in regards to relationships. Like, I don't know. I think she writes some pretty interesting stuff that even without like the element of like, oh, homosexual relationship is fairly strong on its own. Like, it's stuff you can get invested in. And I do think Border is probably the best in regards to that. Kizuna has... I have problems with the secondary relationship in that series, but I do quite like the main relationship. But that's mainly, again, established couple. I like that. Not just like, oh, hey, we're strangers, and then, yeah, we're sleeping together 12 pages in. Like, I don't know. It's an established relationship that's lasted years and obviously has some foundation to it even before we get into the actual series. Yeah, again, Kodaka's work is, I think, very good. Like, her actual art style is really strong. Her story writing is very good, even considering like the issues of the genre. Not necessarily something I would expect most people to read, and it is somewhat of a guilty pleasure for me because there are a lot of problems that I do have with her works, but overall I still enjoy most of them, if not all of them, and Border is, yeah, probably her best, although it's like on forever hiatus, and I think that's in Japan as well. So I can't completely blame June for the fact we only have 5 volumes out. Although I think there might be 6 in Japan. I don't know. June, I don't expect like anything from you, so I don't know. And finally we have, again, June manga bought in that same sale, again for, I think, liquidizing purposes. I bought the entirety of another Kazuma Kodaka manga, Bad Teacher's Equation. And I got these for $5 a piece. So there's Volume 1 Omnibus, Volume 2 Omnibus, Volume 3, Volume 4, and Volume 5. So I don't know anything about this series. I might regret it, but again, I like enough of things about Kodaka's work that whilst I'm hyper aware of the issues, I'm probably still gonna enjoy it. And for $5 a piece, these are 2-in-1s, they're big, and the series is complete. Like, that was a big thing in my decision to pick it up. I sort of just made the decision that I was going to get all of Kodaka's work in English, so this was just the last part that I needed. I already have Kizuna, I had majority of Border, and I think this is the last one of her titles that was put into English. There was an older, like, different publisher who put out parts of Kizuna as well. Maybe the entirety. I don't know. I don't remember. I looked it up a long time ago. But obviously I have one version. I don't need the other. Yeah. I mean, I can't attest to the quality of this work because I haven't read it. I like the art style. I think she draws characters, like, very well. She has a good sense of anatomy, which is maybe not always something, like, that's something people always make fun of BL or yaoi. It's like, oh, they have the giant hands and they don't know proportions and everything's weird and wonky and terrible. I think this might have a student-teacher relationship. Yes. So that's probably a problem for plenty of people. Usually that's, like, a major problem for me. If you're a teacher, don't sleep with the students. Don't do it. That's totally unethical and just, it's gross. But unfortunately, it's very much a trope within BL. But yeah, as I said, I'm probably not going to love this series, but I will probably like it a fair amount. And if I don't, I don't have to keep it forever. I got it for a low enough price that even if I resell it for the same amount, I'm going to be happy. It's not too much of an issue. But yeah, as I said, I can't attest to how this series is because I haven't read it and I don't really know much about it at all. Except for I like the mangaka's other works for the most part. And yeah, so it was cheap and it was an opportunity, and again, it was in the proxy box, so I just got it right now. I bought it ages and ages ago. But yeah. So that is everything that I got for this first half of August. I can't even fit everything on the table here, so there's a lot. But thank you guys so much for watching. Next video won't be nearly as much stuff. I do have all my yen press stuff coming, but aside from that, and at least one volume of Viz stuff, I'm not expecting anything else. Well, I'm expecting a couple things to show up in the mail, but I don't know when because I have slow shipping on that, and it's always a mystery in which things will appear. Aside from that, if I love getting comments, you guys write some wonderful things, and let me know what you've bought, or if you've read any of these things, or you haven't even heard of some of these things, or you totally disagree with my opinion on anything. I'm always happy for a healthy debate and polite conversation in the comment section. I rarely, if ever, delete comments, so you shouldn't really have to worry about that unless you're directly attacking my character over nothing. I'm not a huge fan of that, and these are my comments, so I'm allowed to do what I want. But generally, like, if you disagree with me and you're like, oh, well, I hate such and such series, I'm not gonna, like, you're allowed to do that. Everyone has their own tastes, and I'm perfectly happy to let you enjoy that series. But if you don't want to leave a comment, I do also have my Twitter. The link to is in the direct description below. I'm on there fairly regularly, so you can actually DM me on there, or obviously like direct at me at Collecting G, or the title that it has is simply G, but it's at Collecting G, all one word. And in the description, I also have my book depository affiliate link, which if you use that to buy books via book depository, I get a small monetary commission for that. It's never a huge amount, and I don't expect anyone to buy that. It's, you're not obliged to, but it is wonderful. Like, I would appreciate it if you did. And Book Depository is pretty much the only place I buy new and pre-ordered manga. For anyone outside of the United States, I think it's the go-to. They have free worldwide shipping, which is the biggest plus for it, but the prices are really competitive, and they have great customer service. And some people may complain that it takes a little while to ship out to them or to reach them via being shipped from the UK, especially if you're in the US and are used to free 2-day Prime shipping. But I think for most of us who aren't used to that level of website service, it's a great option. But yes, thank you guys so much for watching. This video is incredibly too long, as always. I really appreciate your patience with me, as per usual. As for next video, or at least next pickup video, yeah, there shouldn't be a huge amount there, so the video itself probably won't be super long, but we'll see. It's always a toss-up when it comes to me. But aside from that, I hope everyone has a wonderful day, and yeah, I'll catch you in the next video, guys. Bye till then.